Vital time has been lost, while scientists say they've been working in a climate of fear.
The red line represents Republicans. The green line represents Democrats.
Frank Luntz is a top American pollster and an advisor to the Republican Party. He analyzes the political concepts the public responds to and helps politicians script their approach.
That government should help people improve their lives, not try to run their lives.
Okay, gives the phrase. Watch that reaction right there. It just goes up and up.
Shortly after George Bush was elected president, Frank Luntz met with Republicans. Some in the party doubted the evidence of global warming, but they had to make their skepticism look credible. Luntz had an answer. His strategy, which began with a warning, was contained in a confidential memo that was later leaked.
The environment is probably the single issue on which the Republicans in general and President Bush in particular are most vulnerable.
It offered key advice. Cast doubt over the science. Question the notion that the world is getting hotter. Ask if global warming is even real.
You need to continue to make the lack of scientific certainty a primary issue.
In 2000, the science was not definitive. There were plenty of people at that point who were challenging it.
The memo urged Republicans to seek out scientists who were doubters and give them a voice.
Be even more active in recruiting experts who are sympathetic to your view and much more active in making them part of your message.
Otherwise, it implied, the Republicans were in grave danger of losing votes in the next elections.
Should the public come to believe that the scientific issues are settled, their views on global warming will change accordingly.
Today, Frank Luntz says the advice he offered the administration on global warming was fair when he gave it, but he's distanced himself from their policy since.
I, George Walker Bush, do solemnly swear.
Since coming to office in 2001, the Bush administration is accused of taking Luntz's advice far beyond what it suggested and turning it into a nightmarish reality. Bush's government is accused of conducting a campaign to censor global warming scientists and of altering or stifling their reports. The world had already been witnessing wild weather for years. But in 2001, scientists under the UN's Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change, IPCC, formed a consensus on the causes. They agreed in the strongest terms yet that man was largely responsible for global warming.
The report you heard today states more categorically that we humans are affecting the Earth's climate system.
The chairman of the scientific body, a British-born American, said governments should act.
This indeed adds impetus for the governments of the world to find ways to live up to the commitments to reduce their emissions of greenhouse gases.
The statement was not welcomed by everyone. Some in America's energy industry felt threatened. After a key speech on the subject, Dr. Watson felt the hostility.
After that speech, a number of individuals from the private sector came up to me and said that they thought the speech was basically a very strong speech, it was an emotional speech, and it was the sort of speech they didn't ever personally want to hear again.
George Bush's new cabinet had close ties to industry. The vice president, Dick Cheney, used to run Halliburton, an oil services company. In charge of commerce was Donald Evans, former chief of a Denver-based oil company. The Treasury was run by Paul O'Neill, the former chairman of the giant manufacturing company Alcoa. And Andrew Card, chief of staff, was formerly a senior car industry lobbyist. Just months into office, Bush formally rejected the Kyoto process, in which the world was uniting to cut emissions. He'd opposed Kyoto before he became president. His reasons are the same today.
I told the world I thought the Kyoto was a lousy deal for America. And I tell you why it was a lousy deal for America. It meant that we had to cut emissions below 1990 levels, which would have meant I would have presided over massive layoffs and economic destruction. Just don't ask any questions.
Then, in 2001, he used exactly the same argument to reverse his pre-election promise to cap U.S. emissions independently. It fell on Christine Todd Whitman to explain this to a dumbfounded world.
He disengaged in a way that lent credence to the belief that many people have the United States just doesn't care about the rest of the world. And we disengaged talking about, well, this is bad for our economy, and we really don't care what the rest of you think. If it's bad for us, we're not going to do it.
Next came this from the oil industry. A memo with a cover note from ExxonMobil was sent to the White House. The memo asked if Dr. Robert Watson, head of the IPCC, could be replaced at the request of America. The administration withdrew its support. Dr. Watson was not re-elected.
The Bush administration and the position of some in the private sector was that I was overemphasizing the importance and the seriousness of climate change, and therefore probably they viewed it would be better to have a different chair.
George Bush set his record on the environment when he was governor of Texas in the 1990s.
Some folks look at me and see a certain swagger, which in Texas is called walking.
And, as Washington now knows, Texans do things their own way.
It tends to be more of a boot-in-your-face style of governance. We have the power, we have the money, we have the votes. We're not interested in talking to you with your reform ideas. We have our agenda to run.
You're listening to News Talk 660, Case Guy.
Welcome to Houston, home of the Texan oil industry.
The left is hysterical, and it has been throughout my lifetime.
A place where global warming is seen by some as an invention by left-wingers.
They hate modern society. They hate modern technology.
An invention by alarmists who detest capitalism and freedom.
They hate the fact that you drive a car, or God forbid, an SUV, and that they can't control you and put you into a train. They hate that fact.
Oh, it's old. It's been updated and upgraded, and as we understand...
The alarmists are people like Linnell Anderson. She's accused Governor George Bush of making it easier for companies to pollute, and is angry that in just 6 years he left an appalling legacy for both Houston and the state.
Number one in smokestacks, number one in ozone pollution, number one in toxic pollution. When you have that many number ones, it's time to stop and take account, and he refused.
Just outside Houston, this fortress of steel spews thousands of tons of harmful emissions into the air. This is the biggest oil refinery in America. It's owned by ExxonMobil, and it's set in a sprawling city of factories. Houston is one of the most polluted cities in America. In the last 6 years, most industrialized nations have cut greenhouse gas emissions. But under George Bush, U.S. emissions have increased by an average of 1% a year. America emits a quarter of the world's greenhouse gases. As reports have flooded in warning of the dangers, scientists say the censorship's tightened. We've tracked the fate of an environmental report produced in 2003 by the administration. It was called Our Changing Planet. The document was severely edited within the White House. Page after page, the edits emphasize that there's no need for alarm. The Earth is undergoing a period of rapid change becomes maybe. Human actions will affect the global climate is changed to might. A section on global warming dangers complains the findings are always negative and asks what about the benefits? With better growing conditions, there may be more food and forest products for harvesting, and that means lower prices for consumers.
This is just one of a number of major reports we've had access to. Some were edited in the same way. In another, the entire section on global warming was simply removed. And in one case, the whole report was sent into what was described to us as a bureaucratic black hole.